welcome to Holding Space with Claire Bidwell Smith and Dr. Karin Luise. My name is Dara Kosberg, and I am the program director of Reimagine. And as a nonprofit organization, we spark community experiences like this one that empower individuals, families, and communities to face the hardest parts of our existence, including serious illness and death, while inspiring people to celebrate life and one another. And it is with profound gratitude that we thank the sponsors who support Reimagine and make this all possible. And before I introduce Claire, I just want to get everyone oriented to Zoom. Those are my cats, Sammy and Biscuit.
Oh my God, that's
yeah, and Biscuit is that cross-eyed, isn't just the photo. So you can turn on and off your mic. We will have a Q&A session after their discussion, and you will have the opportunity to raise your hand. And you can turn on or off your camera, although we invite you to keep your camera on as it makes us feel a little bit closer to each other. You can share comments and ask questions in the chat throughout the session. If you're finding the chat box distracting, in the far right corner, you can click that little arrow and close it. And if you are having any kind of technical issues, I'll be in the chat, so just write a little note and I'll try to help you as much as I can. And with that, I'd like to introduce Claire Bidwell Smith, who is an internationally renowned author, speaker, and grief expert. She's the author of 3 books of nonfiction: The Rules of Inheritance, After This, When Life is Over, Where Do We Go? And Anxiety, The Missing Stage of Grief. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Claire.
Thank you, Dara. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be with you today. This is like my favorite part of the week. I have loved these talks every week so much. For those of you who are new today, I started this weekly series a couple months ago, right when the pandemic came out. And I just was trying to figure out how to provide as much support as possible. And this felt like a really good way to bring people from the death and dying and grief space into these weekly live conversations and just be able to kind of talk about what we're all going through. We've had amazing guests and conversations, and I've loved all of your participation. Please feel free to, put comments and questions and things as we're talking, and then we'll come back to them when we get to the Q&A portion. Karin and I are going to talk for a little bit first. And I'm really excited to have Karin here with us today. She's a really good friend of mine, but we met when her book was coming out, The Fatherless Daughters Project. And she and I have the same agent as well. So we've had a lot of crossover and just work in the world, and we found real kindred spirits in each other. Karin is a coach and an author. She's working on a new book. She has all kinds of amazing offerings that you will hear about. But today I really wanted to bring her on to hold space around Father's Day this week. I've lost both of my parents. I lost my mom at 18 and my dad at 25. And those are things that have really shaped everything about me and my work. And I do a lot of work in the motherless space, in mother loss space. And there's a lot of attention paid to mother loss and a kind of a lot that goes on around Mother's Day, but there's not as much around father loss. And we're going to talk a little bit about why, but I also just really wanted to make sure that we were holding space for that this week too, and talking about it. So welcome, Karin. I'm so glad you could join us. Would love for you to start by just telling us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Claire. I'm so blessed to be here with all of you. I love all these familiar faces. My mom is actually here. Hey, Mom. And other familiar faces and new faces. And I'm so grateful. It's so touching that you guys trust us with your time and your energy, because I know we all have really busy lives. But this week in particular can be really difficult for people, especially with the climate that we have just on the outside. We also have our own internal stuff, that can come up. So yeah, I have written the book called The Fatherless Daughter Project, and I did the research in the book. So I have a really, my heart just feels so much of the intricacy of the emotions that can happen and how people don't understand how difficult Father's Day can be for people that have lost their dad when the rest of the world seems to be living this perfect, hallmark moment with them. And it can be really, really triggering. So in particular, for me, I have not lost a father to death. I've actually was given up for adoption from my birth father to a stepfather. Had my birth father in my life, but there was a lot of addiction and abuse in my home growing up. And then later became estranged from my stepdad because of just a really complex situation. And so I lost my dad by choice, and it was extremely painful. It was really my ultimatum and then his choice. And so I carry around my dad not really wanting me. It was my stepdad, but I was raised as his daughter. It was complicated. And that caused me great pain and caused me to go into a lot of therapy. My mom is now married to a wonderful, wonderful man who's been the most amazing stand-in dad. I consider him more my dad than anyone, but he came into my life when I was grown. But when you lose a dad by choice, which is what I'll be speaking to more, I do know a lot about it by death, but Claire obviously has her own experience on that. There's just a complex array of emotions. And so I'm just really blessed that you're trusting me with this time and space. And hopefully we can say some things today that'll make a difference and that'll help you just to feel better this weekend. Because, we're both in the business of wanting you to feel better. And that's what we're here. So I hope that we can give you some really good tips and some things that'll really make you feel stronger than maybe you're feeling right now. So thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Karin. Why do you think that father loss is not talked about as much as mother loss? And also on that note, I want to point out that there is a lot more father loss to abandonment or rejection in some fashion than there is with mother loss. And so that's this other component that's also not addressed as much. But you guys do a beautiful job addressing that in your book and in your work. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I bet you everyone here would actually probably have a better answer. I mean, I'm going to give my answer, but everyone here probably, you've walked through it so much, and I saw a lot of heads nodding. I think that the mother loss is considered much more detrimental because I think there's just a perception that we're like closer to our moms and we're supposed to have our moms around. And the dad over history, now I think things have shifted, but over history, the dad kind of has been known to check out, or maybe he's there, maybe not. So I think we have this misconception that it's not as difficult as a loss because of the historical understanding that we're just not as close to our dads, and that so there hasn't been as much recognition for what, and I see some men on here too. I love seeing the men on here. Thank you. I will speak to you too, but for the significance of that loss. And speaking as a girl, when you lose your dad at a really young age, you have significant losses of development that girls that had their dads, your counterparts that had their dads all the way through really had. And so I don't want to say you're handicapped in life, but there are certain areas, especially around relationships and around your ability to not feel anxious when it comes to loss. And there's just an ongoing, I think, like Claire's book about anxiety, there's this ongoing anxiety that other people don't carry. And I don't think, unless someone's been through it, they don't realize it. But I do think things are shifting. I think now that in this generation that's having kids now, that the dads are staying home more and that the dads are more connected, I really feel like there's more of a rise of the divine feminine and masculine really kind of meeting each other. So I think that's going to change. And I'd like to be part of that change. But I think that the bond just hasn't been given the consideration. And that's why these chats are so important. That's why you connecting with other people are so important, so that you can speak your truth and that can be understood by others.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think, Claire? I'm interested in what your take is on that. Why do you think mother loss gets much more attention than father loss?
That same thing. I think the role of fathers is changing right now in a pretty big way. I think that fathers are more accepted as nurturers than ever before, but I think previous to now, they haven't always been accepted as the nurturers in the family system. They have, been the hunter-gatherers, going out, coming back, not always being present in the immediate family moments. And so I think that, there's some kind of almost expectation that the relationship is a little different with the dad, and it's a little more distant sometimes. Not always. Like, I know some people who have beautiful relationships with their fathers or are closer with them than with their mothers. But I think that the kind of generalized idea of it is that there's this more, tight-knit emotional relationship with a mom and a more different relationship with a dad. what is it that we lose when we lose a dad? If we lose this with mothers, if we lose this kind of nurturing, safe space, what is it we're losing with a dad, like typically in the kind of generalized idea?
Yeah, oh gosh. So much. Well, I think I want to speak to too. Some people, and this comes up so much in my working with clients, is that they've actually lost their dad twice. The ones that didn't have that relationship and they never got to have that bond. You kind of, a lot of them go through both losses, right? Where the dad either checks out or they're just not. They never get the closeness because their dad never learned it when they were growing up, and then they lose him to death, and so that never gets satisfied. So there's like you're holding both. So there's probably a number of people here that also have experienced that significance in both areas of loss. I think when you lose your dad, and it depends on the age. So in the book and the research that we did, and I say we because I have a co-author on the book. My friend Dina wrote this book with me. The significance is around the age that you were when you lost your dad, and the stage of life you were in, and the way that you lost your dad. And so there's a vast difference of how you experience emotions and how you experience that loss going on. And we break down like developmentally how it affects you. So what's really important to recognize is the time that you lost your dad made you have significant disconnection probably with your world at the time that your dad went away. So like what we talked about, we had someone that we interviewed that ended up like failing a class in school that year. And so her whole life, she thought she was stupid because she got an F. And later when we did the research and I was working with her, she had this aha moment where she was like, oh my God, I've always thought that I just was dumb and wasn't a good reader, but I lost my dad when I was learning these fundamental skills. And so I just was checked out of school that year. And so for her, like that really got in the way of that developmental skill. So I think that when we lose our dads, when it comes to development, we will lose a pocket of life at that time, and things that other people that are going through that have their dads, not only there, but to support them, to encourage them. You know, dads are really great about encouraging you to strive ahead when it's a healthy relationship, you know, do great in sports and you can do anything, and they want to help you. And when it's healthy, they're supportive. So you learn how to have a healthy relationship with a man. If you had that with your dad before he left, that's beautiful, but so many people don't. So there's also that loss of learning how to just be with a man, be with the opposite gender, and to have that comfort. I know for me, that was really, really significant, never really knowing like how close to sit to a man, like especially if it's like a teacher or even a doctor, another like male figure. This discomfort, if you lose your dad at a young age, often you don't develop that. But I think that the skill set that your dad gives you that your mom really isn't equipped to because of the masculine story and the masculine influence on your life that really builds you up. I think that not having that is really a tragic outcome of not having the dad there. So then what you end up doing is you end up learning how to parent yourself, and you end up usually becoming the caretaker yourself, because often when we lose our dads when we're younger, we end up being the caretaker in our homes. So nod your head if you ended up like being a caretaker in your house, or if you like took care of siblings, or maybe your mom. And also, I mean, my mom's here, but we talk a lot in the book about how it added a lot of complexity to your relationship with your mom, depending on what the situation was. And oftentimes, especially if the dad passed away or left for another woman or something, you know, the mom is grieving too. And then you feel so compelled because you're a caretaker and you step into that role. So what we saw was the women were not, and I'll speak to men too. The men also, I would imagine, you have a caretaking bone in you. You love your mom if your dad left, and then your needs get pushed underground, right? So then they don't come up until later, usually when you have another like significant loss. And you know, right now the climate that we're in and what's going on the outside, it's going to be super triggering when you're witnessing a lot of death and things like that. Like, I know it's a whole nother rabbit hole, but I just want to honor that those kinds of situations can bring up those feelings that went underground.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think the loss of either parent really affects our identities. You know, I think it really
100%.
helps us to think about our identities, to think about just who we are in the world, because that's what parents, they bring us in, they show us the world, they take us out into it, they show us how to be us, who they are, they role model for us, whether it's good or bad role modeling. It's still how we form our identities. And when we lose a parent, when we lose a father, we have to kind of reckon with that identity in a new way. Even if we lost a dad when we're in middle age, you know, if it's like not necessarily childhood or adolescence, but you're well into adulthood when you lose your father, there is this profound reckoning with your identity, or at least thinking about it and thinking about how you have perceived your identity. And oftentimes we don't feel there's a strange liberation that comes with the death of a parent. And this is a little strange to talk about, but um, it's not necessarily a positive thing, but there's this liberation that comes with the death or abandonment of a parent, where you kind of get to be yourself in a way without them as your mirror, you know, and you get to kind of look at yourself as a person in the world without that person constantly holding you and role modeling you. Do you see that, Karin?
Yeah, that you're really brave to say that, because I would imagine people relate to that. I feel like there's got to be this untethering. So it's got to be both, like not feeling tethered to somebody when like the rest of the world seems to be, to tie that role modeling to, and that of course, we're trying to please and all of that. But that liberation, that's a different, I would imagine, yeah, that would be, it's actually like a reframe, right? Like you get to be who you are without being then tethered to someone else's expectations. And it depends on how, like where you are in life, right? Like where your stage is and how secure your life is. So if you have also another area of your life that is really unstable at the time of the loss, you know, if you're an adult and you're having a bad financial situation, or maybe you're going through a divorce yourself or something that's also untethering, right? Like that's going to further complicate things. And, you know, you don't want the liberation, but then again, you're taxed to then come into a place of your own that would not be so if your parent was still there.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about why Father's Day is hard. I think all of these holidays and anniversaries, these kind of your birthday, his birthday, you know, these kinds of things, different holidays can really bring up a lot of just angst around this. But I think Father's Day in particular, because it's this giant celebration that we have, is kind of forced in our faces, you know, in the grocery store, the card aisle, and on commercials on television, and, you know, these pictures of these iconic dads by the grill. And when you are going through that kind of loss, it's very painful to see that. And I know that a lot of people really struggle with the idea of, do I still celebrate my dad? Do I still post about my dad? What if you didn't have a good relationship with your dad? What if you have a stepdad that you feel like you want to honor, but you don't feel like you're able to honor your own father? There's like so many different tangled things that happen around Father's Day, and it causes a lot of angst. What are your thoughts about that, Karin?
Yeah, no, you wrapped that up. It's a lot. I mean, it's always, there's so many layers. Yeah. When I did the research for the book, this is the #1 holiday for people that had lost a dad that was triggering. And I think too, not only holidays, and I'll come back to Father's Day, but I want to recognize too that your milestones, like that is actually one of the biggest things, like the milestones of you're getting married, you having your first child, and then also then you becoming of the age that you were when you, the age that your parent was when they passed away. Like those are other, if you haven't gone through those yet, like those are other very normal times when the triggering gets very, very strong, because you're seeing it in a whole different way. But particular to Father's Day, I agree. I think that the glamorization of it, you know, which is beautiful for people that have their dads around, and it's very, I think because the focus is just so keyed in. And so, you know, let's talk about social media for a second. Like, you know, we're here sharing this beautiful technology, but I mean, people are going to be posting, and there's an obligation kind of that we post something about our dads, and it is pressure. So you're going to be seeing, and that might be a way to not to take care of yourself. If you don't want to see all that, like don't go on Facebook on Father's Day. That the pictures seem really perfect. And I think that's something that is really important to point out. So I'm a therapist coach. So is Claire. I can tell you, like, I don't even think I have a client that's ever had a picture perfect relationship with their dad. But I think Father's Day completely magnifies the illusion that everybody else has something you don't, and that they're all living this perfect, like you said, this iconic, you know, Norman Rockwell situation. And so we have a perception, and our loss deepens because of that illusion. Don't you think so, Claire?
Yeah, absolutely. There is so much pressure around that. And then some people also feel private, and they aren't people that want to post all the time. You know, they don't necessarily want to post a tribute to their absent father or their father that has died, and or write about it in any fashion, yet they're still forced to look at everybody else doing it. And there's this weird, you know, internal battle, I think, that I see a lot of clients have, that they're really missing their dad on Father's Day, and they're just kind of bombarded with everybody else's adoration for their still living fathers, and they don't really know how to find themselves in that process. I advise the same thing: stay away from social media. I think there's a lot of anticipation leading up to Father's Day, and this week, and that's why I wanted to do this call right before, because I think leading up to it, it's just this kind of uneasy feeling, or it can cause sadness or anger or anxiety. And so I know that once the day is done and passed, you feel a lot better, but it's like kind of getting up to that day and getting through it. What are some things you think people can do on that day, either to take care of themselves or to honor or connect with a living or here father?
I love that you talked about the anticipation, because that is really important. And that goes for any of these days that I mentioned that are really significant days. I mean, oftentimes our worry and fear and anxiety are much worse than the actual process of getting through the day, but it's all those days that are leading up of you dreading, feeling what you maybe don't really want to feel. And obviously that the day is, and I know Claire and I work with people on this all the time. The day is about you doing exactly what you feel like doing, like whatever you need, because each one of you is going to be in a different stage of the grief process, whether it just happened. So if this is your first Father's Day, and Claire, I want you to speak to this point more about the first Father's Day. Very significant. The first one is very significant, and they all are. But that first year, those of you that know that have lost your dads to death, is it's hard. So much love and hugs and everything to you if you're going through it for the first time. And when I was researching what helped other people and what I've heard, I mean, it's like simple things, but just as a reminder to you guys, sometimes you need to be reminded. I mean, the self-care, so you have full permission on every day leading up to that day and Sunday to do whatever you need to feel the way you want to feel. Now, I know you're not going to feel like you would feel if you had the iconic dad next to you, but if you need the cry, if you feel like you just want to do that and release some toxins from your body, do it in an honoring way, like a ritual way, like I'm going to be releasing this, like honor that. If you want to like not like even go there at all, go do something that really distracts you, go do obviously time outside. The number one thing that I had women tell me that really helps them is listening to music. I mean, that across the board was what it sounds so simple, but like that distracted piece, and music also puts you in a higher vibration. I'm a very big spiritualist, and the clients I work with, I talk a lot about energy and vibration. So if you're interested in that, please connect with me after this. When you're in that vibration of anger, and especially if you're in a vibration of feeling guilty, my clients on here know this because I talk about it nonstop. If you have any guilt in you about maybe your dad's death or anything around it, or about feeling ashamed because he left by choice or because he didn't love you enough when he was here, or if there is any guilt and shame, those are the lowest vibrational points you can be on the frequency of consciousness. And the highest is love and acceptance, all right? So what we want to do on this day and leading up to this day is you just remembering, if I am down at guilt and shame, you're actually resonating at about a 10 or a 15. And there's this whole scale that's like an inverted triangle, and love and acceptance is up around 400, 500, all right? So when you're down here at guilt and shame, if that's a feeling that you're experiencing, it's super contracting, and you're gonna attract more experiences that day, in my belief, that are gonna kind of match that. I'm a big believer in law of attraction. But if you can find a way, anger is actually up the scale, just to give you anger is I think about at a, like an 80, because it actually has a little bit of energy behind it. It's actually higher than guilt and shame. But if you can find a way back up to that place of love, and even if it's honoring him through tears, if it's honoring him through the pictures, if you didn't have a good relationship and you just want to distract yourself and do something to love yourself, love 500, listen to your music, take your salt bath, ask. I think the number one thing too, and I know we're in a weird situation this year, but it's ask for what you need. People that haven't been through this have no idea what you're going through. So huge thing, your besties, or if you have a spouse, like if you've never been super honest and expected them to do something for you that day, and then added on top of your emotions, you feel like you've been isolated and no one cares about you, then that's just going to complicate it. So you know what, ask your one best friend, your two best friends, your spouse, be really honest. Look, I'm feeling this way. This day makes me feel this way. It would be really great if I could get this from you. Like, I'm getting chills all over saying that. So many of us, especially fatherless kids, learn to be caretakers of others, which meant we didn't ask for what we needed because we get so busy taking care of everybody. So this is the time when you really need to ask for what you need. And some of the other things, just to give you guys some simple things, I've got my list right here. Doing something that's really funny, laughter and humor. If you want that distraction, like, it's totally cool. Journaling and writing out the way that you're feeling. Like, maybe every year you go back and you keep one journal that's just for writing about your dad on certain days when you're really feeling anything. And then the great thing about journals is you can go back and see how much you've grown from the last year, and you can see that process. Super healing. And if you are in a place of comfort to spend time with your friends, I know this year that's really tough. if you're at a distance or however is comfortable for you, this would be the time that would, even if it's meeting them on a Zoom call, like it's just the connection, connect to something higher than those low vibrational feelings. If you want to feel better, right? If you want to go into that place of grief, just do it and funnel that love for yourself. If you have a great love for him, I mean, we all feel differently about our dads, but if just funnel it through love, because that will raise you up to a place of higher consciousness. So I know that was a lot.
That was amazing. So many things that you just said that were so amazing. I want to touch on a few of them. I think, yes, getting through this day, especially if it's your first year, this day is going to be really difficult if it's your first year. I have both a client and my sister-in-law who lost their fathers to COVID. And this is their first Father's Day, since that. And I know it's going to be really painful and really difficult. I think whatever you need to do to get through the day, if you want to close all the blinds and watch Netflix all day, or if you want to do something that honors your father, or if you want to, just really lean on support from your friends and family, I think whatever feels good, there's not one right thing to do. So don't pressure yourself to do one perfect thing on that day. If you need to skip that day, it's really okay. I think that what Karin said about asking for help is really important. I think especially around these kinds of anniversaries and holidays and days like this, most people don't realize what you're going through. They just aren't thinking about it because, we're all self-centered human beings and we're thinking about whatever's going on in our lives. We're not always thinking about these kind of really intricate experiences that the people we love are having. And sometimes when you have loss like this, that's maybe years old, people especially aren't thinking about it. But these losses, they could be 20, 30 years old, and Father's Day can still be difficult, And I think really honoring that and letting people know, sometimes they're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that was a hard day for you. I'm here to support you. What can I do? How can I help you? And so I think just being open and honest about that is really, really important. It's why I try to talk so much about grief and the length of grief all the time, because I'm constantly trying to just broaden that awareness that grief lasts a long time and it comes back over and over throughout our lifetimes. And it comes up in these holidays and these anniversaries, and often people around us really have no idea. But I think that the people that you love will most likely be very responsive to you asking for a little extra support or attention around these days. I think if you're in a place to do it, finding some way to either honor yourself or your father on that day, or both, or it's really vital. I think it's really healing. Mm-hmm. One thing that I've always done is write letters to my mom and my dad, and and last year, I remember I bought my mom a Mother's Day card. I was at the drugstore and I was walking through the card aisle and I was like, ugh, Mother's Day. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy my mom a card. And I bought her a card and I wrote it and I put it up on the counter with all the other Mother's Day cards that started appearing from my kids and things. And it felt really good. And I think that's something we could do for our fathers as well. Or even just simply sitting down and writing them a letter, telling them how you are, telling them how much you miss them, or working through something if there's guilt or shame or anger that you need to express, writing them a letter to kind of get it out. It's a great day to do that. It's a really good day to kind of honor whatever's going on inside of you and touch into that. And then also, of course, giving yourself some love. I think we get very, there's an interesting just kind of insecurity that can come within grief, and a vulnerability that can be very hard to hold, and to give ourselves some compassion in that space, I think is really important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's key. I think I'm glad you said compassion. It is key. I mean, it is, we don't, because none of us are taught to do it, right? Like clients, and to teach that, it's like an undoing. I think we're taught to, get over things, and right, you need to move on, and all that language that people that don't know say. And the complexity that comes up, and the shame that can come up around not getting over things. And I'm glad you said it that way, Claire, that the length of grief, I mean, there's no way, I don't ever let my clients say get through things ever. Like, get over things. You just move through them and you learn, and it's about integration, right? So the more we resist something, the bigger it's going to get. And so grief and, when we're holding loss, what we learn and grow into is learning how to integrate it. Not resist it and get over it and somehow leave it in 2020 or whenever it happened, but to integrate it. And so that is the journey that all of you guys are on. Like, how do I weave this into my life? And, part of you is what you're going through is going to educate other people. I mean, honestly, people don't know. I don't know how many of you ever had someone that loses their dad come up to you later and be like, oh my God, I never knew that you were going through this. Like, now I get it. And then all of a sudden you have a running buddy, because people don't. So letting people know is so significant. And the compassion piece is so key. Like, you are allowed to feel any way that you feel. And compassion it's so close to love. It is love. It's love for the self. And so, yeah, I'm glad you said that, Claire.
Yeah. And I think too, I want to make this point because I see this come up a lot where people will feel like they'll feel very conflicted about honoring stepdads and dads and father-in-laws and, you know, all these various father figures that are in our in our lives, and how to honor all the different ones, or maybe they feel like they're pressured to honor one but not another, and how to kind of cope with that. Karin, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it can, I think being super honest, I mean, I have a wonderful stepdad, and well, now I'm not seeing him this year because he's been compromised, but actually my real dad is back in my life. So I've got this really complex situation. So I choose to go see him. And, you know, I have a moment where, like, my stepdad that raised me, that was my dad for 25 years. Like, it's complex. Everyone has their own story here. It's complex, you know? And I think if you've lost your dad to death and there's a new stepdad in the picture, I think being super honest. I know too, Claire, I've had people talk about with having their dad passed away and then having their spouse, another father in the house, and with their children, and how they haven't really let the spouse know, like, even though that day they're honoring, it's the same kind of feeling, right? I'm honoring you, but I also am going to need time over here to really just honor what's going on with me. I think it's just all about being super honest with the people that are around you. Because if your stepdad, I mean, I hope if you have it, I mean, I'm really blessed to have one that totally understands. Hopefully that's a person that can hold space for you. And that's the key. Like, whoever can hold space for you, that's the people that you need to be talking about. And the people that aren't going to get you don't have the life experience to understand. You can educate them some, but this year it's about honoring you and being super honest about what you need. And if you want to honor both, that's your journey, and that's an act of self-love that it's up to you to experience. So I hope I answered that. I know everyone has a different story, and there's no simple answer, right? We've all got our own complexity. By the way, I love this chat. I'm trying not to get distracted, but I am looking at everything that you guys are saying, and I really appreciate.
We're going to open it up
conversation.
Yeah, and start answering some of these questions. So feel free to put more questions in here too, you guys. We're going to start answering them. But one of the last things that I wanted to ask you about was how do we talk to our kids about our fathers that we've lost? I know you have 3 kids, and I have 3 kids. I have 6 technically, with my 3 stepkids and my 3 kids. But I know for me, having lost a father, you know, I really try to tell my kids stories about him. I really try to just talk about him a lot and in all kinds of ways, and talk about if there's ever something I'm showing them how to do, if there's something I'm teaching them that he taught me, I always really make sure to talk about, like, my dad taught me how to do this. That's how I know how to do this, you know, and just really try to evoke his presence, bring him into their lives. It's sometimes really painful for me that they have this other set of grandparents that they know, and not my parents at all. My daughter asked me today at lunch, she said, do you think grandma would like us? And she was talking about my mom, and I just, you know, I was just like, oh my gosh, how much can I tell you how much she would love you, you know? And just that she would even ask it is a little heartbreaking, you know? So I really try to talk about them a lot, show pictures of them, tell funny stories about them. And that's one of the things I do. How do you talk to your kids about your fathers, you know, your stepdad, your dad, all of that?
My mom is sitting here waiting for this answer. I love it. And Claire, I'm so glad you said what you said, because I think so much of it, if your dad passed away through death, it's that keeping the spirit alive. Of course, I believe firmly that they're in spirit around you. I'm a huge believer that they are around you, especially on Father's Day. Anytime you think of your dad, if he's on the other side, he's right next to you. But for the physical experience that you're having with family, I think keeping that, I mean, that's the intention, right? To keep that alive, that love alive, that connection alive. So it's the connecting them, like you are bridging that for them. And that's so beautiful. And I think it also models to kids, let's just be open. And a lot of people feel really taboo and weird about talking about someone that's passed on, or they don't know how to do it. And again, like, it's just being honest and being open with your kids when you're having a moment or a memory. Don't forget, you're actually modeling to them how to be in their life about sharing their emotions and not to bottle things up. So that's another silver lining to being like Claire, like the way that you're being. Yeah, I'm it's complex. Luckily they have a great step granddad who has really been great. But I will say my real dad that gave me up for adoption is a really good granddad to them. Like, he's doing things that he never really was able to do with me. He sees them every once in a while, and so that is what it is. I have some stories that are really painful about him, and I've chosen not to share those yet. I've just let them know that he wasn't really. I let them know sometimes. And I'm also divorced too, so their dad lives outside in another house. We do a lot of discussion just about family dynamics, and I let them know like how it was when I was growing up, and how often I saw my dad, because it wasn't very often. And my stepdad, it's tough because they've never actually met him, the dad that raised me. And so I don't tell them anything that's not age appropriate. I will let them know some of the what's happened in like the fracturing. I don't give them any of the details. But I let them know that I went through something really, really painful. So that, again, back to that point, I'm really honest with them about the emotional experience in language that is appropriate for them. And I'll talk a lot about where they are. And I'm sure you do this too, Claire, like the age that they are at. That's when I'll reflect back to them, like what was going on with me when I was their age, and have that connection there, because that's really what it's about. But I'm with all of you guys, like, and I know Claire is too, like going through it in real time, and still trying to figure it out myself. I mean, I'm a trained therapist, but I also have my own stuff. So I feel you guys, those of you that also have really complex situations. Like, it's just doing the best you can. And if you say something one day that later you're like, like if it was a complex situation that was negative, always just go back and be like, hey, you guys, you know what? Yesterday I said something that was negative, or this is what I said. Here is really the way I want you to feel about it. Here's really what I meant to say, what I meant to communicate. And I want you to know that I mess up too. Like, so if you've had a negative situation, speaking to that, but Claire, with a father that's been lost, that there's just a lot of painful grief, and that you had a really good relationship. I think keeping him alive through conversation and keeping that connection is really important, and the kids can feel it.
Absolutely. The overall thing I want you guys to take away and think about is just, not brushing away these feelings. I'm so glad you're all here. This is going to be helpful and healing, just being here and just acknowledging that this is a loss for you in your life, that Father's Day is a tough weekend. That's really important, no matter how long ago it was that you lost a father, or in what fashion you've lost a father. Those feelings are really real. And when we try to push them away and deny them, they manifest in anger and guilt and shame, in self-loathing and all kinds of weird stuff that's not healthy. And when we acknowledge it and we step into and we integrate that grief and loss, like Karin said, I think that is when we really heal and we move forward in beautiful ways. I love all these comments and questions in here, and I want to start addressing some of them. I was thinking we'd start with Linda, because she's asked a couple of times. She wants to know, how do you support someone when their loss is 6 months ago or a year ago and everyone has stopped talking about it? And I think Jenny here also has a great response to that, about how just a simple check-in, like, how have you been doing since your loss, is a really good one. I think it's never a bad thing to check in on someone who's gone through a loss. Even if they're not talking about it or no one else is talking about it, they are likely feeling it and thinking about it. And all you have to say is like, hey, I'm thinking about you. I know it's been a year, but I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. And then take their lead. If they don't want to talk about it, at least you checked in and just kind of acknowledged it, or it may just open them up completely. Karin, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my closest friends that have lost any significant loss, I put it in my phone the day of the loss. And I mean, and every year I'll reach out and say, hey, on that day. And then if one day they mention their birthday, I'll go put that on my phone too, and I'll reach out to them. And every single time they say, you're the only person that, not to give myself congratulations, but I know that because I know the importance of the recognition, because you're right. Like the first few months of loss, due to, to death, tragic, any death, it's all tragic. It's all unexpected, even when it's expected. Like it all feels sudden when it happens. The first 3 months, like you're just kind of walking through, there's not even a word to describe it. You're just like, you're dealing with the specifics. You're distracted. You're in shock. Right. And so, I mean, the real feelings don't start, and you'd wonder why you can't cry. And it's this really crazy experience. And then some days you like can't control it, and it's just everywhere. And it's really hard, especially if you lost your dad and no one else around you had lost your dad yet, and you're the only one that even knows what this feels like, and you don't get that support. Like, it's so devastating, and it comes, like you said, in waves. And I think when it's so new, like to me, I will sit now, I'll always reach out in the beginning, but I'll sit back and I'll make a note, the 3 to 6 month mark. That's when I'll go back to the person and be like, all right, I know everyone's been huddled around you, which is beautiful, right? But like, there's no more casserole showing up at 3 months. Like, everybody's resumed their lives. And it's the exact point that you start having like the real feels, right? And then I mean, I would reach out to those people, and you guys that have lost know this, on the holidays, especially the first year. Hey, I'm thinking about you. Like, I just want you to know that I'm sure today, just putting words to someone else's pain and repeating back to them, like calling them and checking them. So to what we learn as counselors and coaches is just say back to somebody, and I'm sure you guys all need this. Say back to them what they said to you. Oh, like if someone says, I'm just really pissed off today because, you know, I have to go hang out with my, you know, my father-in-law, and I really miss my dad, and I have to put on a pretty face and blah, blah, blah. And I'm pissed, and I got to like cover it. And then you just saying back to them, God, I hear that that's really hard for you to go over to someone, to that house, because you're really feeling pain and you really need that attention yourself. And then it is so healing for someone just to have their feelings heard and understood. So that's a really important tool. And it's something, though, since we're talking about asking for what you need, you can ask, like if you do have a spouse or best friend, you can ask them for that specific thing. Like, I need to know that you heard me. Like, am I saying this correctly? What did you hear that I'm feeling? And make sure that you're being understood. I know I just went around the world.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good thing. Thank you. Totally. Elizabeth has a question here. I know this isn't directly related to what you're talking about, but my baby passed away recently, and I'm nervous about supporting my husband on Father's Day. I'm also worried about our community won't reach out to him as much as I was contacted on Mother's Day. My husband is acting as though Father's Day won't affect him, but I'm sure it will. I'm so sorry, Elizabeth. That is such a difficult loss. And I think it's a particularly difficult loss to navigate within a relationship. Karin, I'm sure you've seen this too. I think I see it in a larger context when even just a family loses a family member, the whole family grieves in different ways. But when a couple loses a child, it's this kind of dyad that's very difficult to navigate in terms of grief, particularly because men and women are so different in their grief processes. Like you said, Elizabeth, the community really reached out for you on Mother's Day. And that's in some ways more of a feminine thing. I see often a lot of women will pull support around them. They will talk about their losses. They will seek out communities to talk about it within. And fathers are very different. Fathers are much more internal. They're much more action oriented. You know, they do physical activities to get out some of their grief or aggression or feelings. They don't talk about it in a community sense as much. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It really depends, I think, on the man's personality too. Karin, what do you think about that?
Yeah, everything you said. I mean, it's because they weren't taught, right? I mean, we're all enculturated to be the way that we are through the systems we grew up in, and men were just conditioned just to stuff it and get over it and go throw the ball and like don't show emotion. I mean, it's a true deal. And so I would imagine your husband may have been taught that. And so I'm always wondering, often what I say to my clients, and I'm seeing your questions beautifully worded, I would say, have you actually said this exact thing to him? Like, that's to me a really powerful thing. Often we'll go to people and we'll say what we're really feeling and concerned about. And then it's like, have you actually ever said that to them? And we often are like, no. And I'm like, actually what you just said, this question, like I would, again, like I'm all about like really being honest and finding that communication, like saying what you're saying to us here to him. Like, I'm really worried. Like, I saw that this happened. Have you acknowledged that, you know, with him? And not that you need to hold all of his grief too, because you're going through yours. And yes, it is so complex because everybody's grieving in their own way. But just say, just maybe even hold like that space. Just say, I know that I got a lot of attention on Mother's Day, and we're both doing this the same way, and you do it however, but just, you know that I'm here, and just be a safe space for him on that day and let him know that, you know, I care about you too through this, and whatever you need to do, I'm here, because he's going to have his own journey. Yeah. I'm so sorry.
I feel like my advice on this is often to be curious about your partner's experience rather than thinking that they should be a certain way or wanting them to be the same way you are. You know, often that's where we see a lot of that friction and that tension, is thinking that we need to be having the same grief experience, but you're just not going to, you know, you're going to have completely different grief experiences. and it's going to look different inward and outward, culturally and, you know, interpersonally. So being really curious about his grief experience and being really open and just kind of letting him know that you're holding space for whatever he is. This first one, it's going to suck, you know, it just is, as you know, going through Mother's Day. There's no way around it. It's going to be painful. And in some ways you kind of have to just let him know that you're there for however he wants to do it, but also let him do it the way he's going to do it. But
yeah, I love that. I want to bring something up that we haven't mentioned here, which those of you that have siblings, so this is what you just said rings true as well for siblings, because that's another really complex part of father loss. And just like with the spouse, everyone's going to go through it differently. Like each one of you, if you have siblings, was with your dad for a different amount of time, and whether they're male or female, and according to personality, like everyone's going to process it really differently. And so I just want to recognize that that is also in this mix, and around Father's Day can be another one of those things that may come up. So I want you to know that you're not alone. Nobody processes the loss the same. In every family, the siblings will process it very, very differently, and that can be really frustrating to us. You know, you can be like, wow, how are you not even doing anything? Or someone maybe is overdoing it, or whatever. So again, like, I love it. You said the curiosity. If you have a relationship where you can be curious, and it's just accepting. There's no right grief process. Everybody does it differently. Everybody does it in their own time. It's perfect. It's perfectly yours. No judgment in the grief process. That's definitely something I've learned 100%. Never judge the way someone grieves. And I know you guys feel the same way, because you're going through it and you've needed compassion for the way that you've chosen to grieve.
well, also the truth is too that we will judge other people's grief processes, but to kind of recognize when
it comes up, yeah,
you know, we're going to do it, and it's going to happen to us as well, and to kind of just recognize it and take a step back and always go back to that place of compassion for yourself and for the other person, you know. So when you are judging someone, go to that place of compassion for why you're feeling pain, why you're feeling judgmental, and then also the compassion that you feel from other people when they're judging you. It's always coming from a place of pain and fear and sadness, you know, that kind
always.
of.
Sorry, I would agree. The fear, yeah, I would agree. Sorry, my crazy animal.
That dog ate my shoe once.
My dog did eat your shoe. It's that one, yeah.
What other questions do you guys have? I see some comment. Marissa says that my mom lost her dad at age 6, and this is so helpful. My dad and I left her, and he became my primary caregiver when I was 6. It gives me perspective on her ongoing grief about it as I interpret it. That's really interesting. You know, I think this idea that grief is so much longer than we realize needs to be reiterated over and over and over. I know some of you on this call have gone through really recent loss, and some of you on this call have gone through, loss decades ago. And it's not that we're always grieving, but the loss is always part of our life, you know, and it plays out in so many ways, you know, just like Marissa was talking about her mom and, you know, her life going forward with that. This is a loss. Her mom's loss is something that's playing out in her own life. And I want you guys to feel like you can give yourselves permission to recognize how your grief is playing out, how it's affecting your life and your relationships. Leah wants to know if we can speak a bit about ambiguous loss for those who've never met their fathers. Karin, this is definitely your department.
Yeah, it's really, it's heavy, I think, because there's not really, the attachment didn't come. So, you know, you kind of are in this like unknown. I you know, I hadn't heard it called ambiguous loss, because it's actually not something that I've actually been through or studied, but you're the expert, because if this is you and you're going through it, then you're the expert on it. I tell you, you would know more probably than I would. But I will say that, you know, it's going to relate to, I would want to sit down and talk to you, like the stories that you've heard, if there are any stories, or is this just like a phantom person that you've never met? And it's the complexity. I think what it brings to you is you don't know, if you don't know, like I've worked with clients that whose dad did die, like when they were really little and they have no memory of them. So it feels ambiguous. Is not knowing like, what were they like, right? And what personality traits did I get from them? And did they like chocolate milk? Did they drink coffee? Do I sound like him? And so I think in that, I just want to honor that if that's something some of you are going through, that really strong, again, is that untethering feeling, like, what am I attached to? I don't even, and because I think there's a grounding when you know what traits you get from parents, like, it's like, oh, that explains it. And it makes it just, there's like a grounding, there's a comfort, again, the connection. So you have like no connection, there is, again, like what Claire was talking about the becoming who you are without trying to please them. So you, if that is you, your whole life, you've not had to please someone that you're trying to impress, but you've come into of who you are totally, not knowing what strengths you would be getting. And so, I would hope in those kinds of lives, what can be super important is having like the stand-in father, having other male figures that you can have the connection with. But the ambiguous loss definitely brings its own set of it's so unknown that I would imagine it feels really free falling. And I would say like anything where you can do like anything that grounds you is going to be super important in your life. Anything that's making you feel connected and grounded and a part of belonging, because you've gone through something that most people can't relate to. What do you think, Claire? Have you worked with people that haven't met their parents or their dad?
I have, and one of the things that I've worked with a lot of women who lost their moms their moms died in childbirth, or their moms died before. They have no memories of their mothers. And some of the things that we work on is just separating the grief out and letting yourself have this grief. I think sometimes when you have these ambiguous losses or these more complicated losses, if you had a complicated relationship with the father that died or that you lost or that abandoned you, I think separating those things out from the actual grief is really important, and letting yourself have this period of time where you just get to grieve the dad that you wanted, the dad that you had hoped to be there, or the dad that you wished you could have known, and really letting yourself have that experience of pure grief, I think is really important. And then doing other work on the other side of that to work with some of those more complicated feelings, like questions about who he was, or working through anger or guilt or shame to resolve anything that happened with him. But I think it's actually really, I'm not a compartmentalizing person. I'm a big, messy, emotional person. But I think that it actually is really helpful to compartmentalize in this case. And it can be some good work to do.
Beautifully said.
Yeah. We have time for one or two more questions. If anybody wants to come on video and unmute yourself and ask a question directly to me or Karin, we welcome that. And Karin, I wanted to ask you, while any more questions come in, what do you think are some of the best ways to get through anger or guilt and shame? Because until we kind of get through those pieces, we can't move forward into just like a more self-acceptance, love, peaceful feelings, healing. But there's often a lot of guilt, shame, anger that come with loss, whatever kind of loss it is.
Yeah, and you know what? Everyone has it, and every client that I've ever had has some deep level of guilt and shame. And, again, if your dad left by choice of unworthiness, or if you never had a connection with your dad when he was alive, we often carry around this sense of being unlovable and not good enough. Like that's at the root of so much of people's pain. And what comes up around that is fear, and how it plays out is in relationships and all that. So it will materialize, but the way to work through, which is why we do the work that we do, and I teach courses on this. I have several people in here that have taken courses from me. We have to just see where it came from. I'm not a big believer in if you've had a traumatic loss, the grief work is imperative, like feeling it when it's time and you're ready, like the trauma has to be felt and dealt with. I know, because I've had to go through it myself. I don't say had to. We can reframe it. I got to go through it. Like I love being able to reframe those things. I got to go through that processing with some beautiful healing counselors and therapists. I did EMDR work around a lot of my traumatic history. And so if there's a trauma there and it feels traumatic in your body, please get the healing work, and please get healing work on your body. Work with someone that does whether it's energy work or breath work, or just even getting a massage, like help your body work this out and be super intentional that is being held somewhere. I mean, we hold it in our throats, we hold it in our chest, we hold it in our abdomens, we hold it way down here. I mean, we hold it, right? You grip. And so we want to keep releasing that energy. And that's a beautiful way to honor your healing process and honor the holistic being that you are. Once the trauma has been, I don't want to say resolved, because it becomes it's part of your story, but you resolve the traumatic, I guess the indentation that keeps you paralyzed. So once we kind of get through that, the working through, now you guys are all here, so that says to me that you are open for growth, you're open for conversation. My guess is like you want to be better. So no, like the stuffing it and not recognizing it, and then going through like the patterns of relationships like over and over again, and never really taking responsibility for what it is in your life that may be causing some painful patterns. Because I'm just being real, like that, it showed up in my life that way. I've been divorced twice. It shows up in most people's lives in relationships. That just tends to be where our patterns come out of unresolved feelings. So once you can get to the place where you can really recognize, you know, and it's not only a relationship with people, it's in the workplace and it's with yourself. Like, do I even know how to love myself? I don't even know how to love, you know, it's a big answer. I have a course called the Love Shift, which some of you just took. It's when we can find a way to return to that love when we haven't received it or we've lost it, like that. It sounds like rhetoric, but it is the total key. Like that, it is the key. That's what liberated me when I finally got it. And it got me getting really real about, and with my clients, getting really real, like, where are these feelings from? Before we can move on, like, let's just go back and look. Let's open the book. And why are we feeling this way? Like, why is this coming up? What is it? And then once we recognize it, we can then honor it. Like, there's a very Buddhist perspective, and which we've addressed here. Honor it with compassion. Like, don't resist it and force it out. Like, let it see it and honor it. Oh, I know why I feel angry. I know why I'm feeling guilty. It's because A, B, and C. And then the Buddhist perspective is and then you let it pass through. And when it comes up again on his birthday or whatever that feeling is, if you can get support around it, beautiful. Honor it, see it. Oh, I know why. Don't push it away. Honor that feeling because it's a part of your history. It's a part of your life. There's a reason it's valid. Then that compassionate piece comes in again, and then we let it pass through, and we do what we need to do to feel the way that we want to feel. And then the beautiful thing, as you're coming through that, like this butterfly perspective, like, you get to become a new person. You get to become something, and you become something. I mean, I became a therapist, and Claire did too, because of these losses. That's why I became a therapist, because I wanted to understand more about the process, and I wanted then to help people. So many of you that are on here, I know you want to turn the grief and the loss, you want to use your story and your resilience as you come into that space to help others. And so that is when the magic gets to happen. And if you're not there, that's okay. And if that's not your calling, that's okay. You may just one day be the on an airplane, the person next to you just lost your dad, and it may be 10 years down the line for you, and you are that one voice that changes that one person's life on that airplane that one day, and you have served and used your grief in a beautiful way. So that is the beautiful thing that comes, and then there's purpose in it, right? So we talk about turning pain into purpose. And when that calling comes to call a friend, because you know how much loss is when you know that they had a loss, and you, like someone just said, they're putting, and Linda was saying, putting that on your calendar, and you pay that forward, then you're transforming all of those rigid emotions into something soft and beautiful that goes out into the world, and you're making a difference. So
I knew you would have good answers, Karin.
I was feeling it. Yeah.
We're feeling it. I want to end with this last question because I think it's such a nice one to end on, from Julie about, she's curious how to continue the relationship with our dads who have died without being in denial that they're dead. I think this is such an important part of moving through loss and grief is developing an internal relationship with them, developing a spiritual relationship with your lost loved ones. I think for a long time in the grief world, back, before the last 20 years, there was a really big emphasis on letting go and moving on and kind of really just letting go of your person. And now we've really realized that the answer is not to let go of them, but to find new ways to hold on to them and take them with us through our lives. Whether it's a parent, whether it's a baby, whether it's a sibling or anyone that we've lost, a pet even, how do we hold on to them and create a new relationship with them that continues to exist throughout our lives? Because that's what actually feels a lot better. Even if it's of somebody who you had a complicated relationship with, there is still so much work we can do to resolve complicated relationships, complicated feelings, and find a place to hold on to those people. I think doing a lot of spiritual work, Karin is a huge spiritual seeker and teacher. And I think for me too, it's been my own spiritual journeys. And, that looks different for everybody. Let yourself be curious. If there is something spiritual you've ever been curious about, or if there's a religion that resonates with you, or just open that door a little bit and read some books or attend some conferences or seminars to kind of open your mind a little bit and start thinking about different ways that we can connect with the people that we've lost and loved. I think that is really important. Karin, we're pretty much at time, but you want to add on that a little bit?
Well, I could talk about that all day.
I
I
know.
love it.
I don't know if I can open that door, but
Yeah, well, actually, at Nico, I want to recognize that is a beautiful comment you just made there. So thank you for that. I was busy reading that, and yeah, the significance. So that culture and spirituality brings into this, and you know, also recognizing that this year is really freaking different than other years. You know, let's just the elephant in the room. Let's just honor that too, because I mean, this year you may or may not. I mean, whatever you're going through in your perspective and your experience going through what's been happening the past, you know, 4 to 6 months in our lives is significant too. So I just want to honor the self-care that you give yourself this weekend, the days leading up to it and on Sunday, so important for you to do and to ask for what you need. And just to know, like, this is going to feel different than other ones because we're experiencing a big disconnection, right? So the connections that you may, or the places that you may have wanted to go may not be open. So just take so much care of yourself and honor those feelings and just let them just be what they are. Ask for what you need, but self-love really, and the connection, like you said, Claire, to end on that, the spiritual connection. I mean, I'm a channel. I also do some mediumship work. And I had a very significant loss in my life that led to a big spiritual awakening and awakening of those gifts. And it was because I lost someone really close to me that I ended up realizing how we can actually communicate, you know, with the other side. And that's something that I love taking part in. And, you know, even if we're just communicating or connecting, maybe is a better word, if that's not something that's comfortable for you, that it's the connection. Again, like it's coming back to this, that connection that you can still feel with the person if they're on the other side, and just thinking about them again brings them into the room. They love when you look at their photographs. They love when you play. By the way, they love when you dance. Let me just bring this up. The spiritual world loves when you're having a good time. So what we're talking about is really heavy. So this is actually what I want to be the last thing I tell you guys. They love when you're enjoying your life. And this is something we didn't bring up. Even though you're sad, you can turn the music up and have a little dance party in your room because they love to see you play. They don't need to be honored forever by you having a sad day and feeling like you have to close the curtains. If you need to, please do what you need to do, honor that, but you're not obligated to be that in that space because of them. They love to be around you when you're dancing and listening to music, if that feels like something you could do. If not, totally fine, be where you are. But if you can do something super fun that day, they love being there, because what happens when you're doing that is you have an expanded energy. Your aura starts glowing in new colors, and they can see that because they're on the other side. They've got the secret. They're watching you in spirit form. So they love feeling that joy off of you and being with you in those moments. So just wanted to remind you guys of that.
thank you so much, Karin. It was such an honor to have you here with us today. And I'm honored to be with all of you guys. And I wish you a really peaceful weekend and just to take care of yourselves. And yeah, thank you. We will not be here next week, but back in 2 weeks with the founders of a really amazing organization called Being Here Human. And they do a lot of grief work, and I'm really excited to talk to them. Dara, I'm going to let you close us out, but thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. It's been an honor to participate.
We're also going to send out the newsletter where you can find Karin and all of her offerings, because
yeah. If we don't know each other yet, please let me know, and reach out, DM me or message me and let me know that you were on this call, so I know how we know each other. Okay, I would love to hear from you guys. Thank you for giving us your time. It was an honor. And thanks, Claire, for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Karin, and thank you, Claire. And I can just say, as someone, I haven't lost my dad, but I lost my mom, and I feel like there was so much that I just took from what you shared for my own experience, and thinking about how I can move through my grief, I don't know, more intentionally. So thank you for that. And I just wanted to highlight that we just posted the event that Claire mentioned. So that'll be happening on July 2nd. I put that link in, as well as I put your website, Karin, but I will also be sending out a follow-up email with a recording and how you can reach Karin. I also wanted to highlight that there are 2 doses of togetherness coming up. One is tomorrow about death and dying in the Black community with Stephanie Rivers, my colleague, who's the Senior Director of Development, and her friend LaToya Cooper. And it'll be them really just, they're very good friends, kind of just sharing from their own personal experience, their relationship with this. And then we also have a wonderful artist, dancer, registered nurse who is Tara Reinders on Monday. And she's going to be talking about her relationship with grief as a nurse. So I really recommend both of those. And I also just wanted to acknowledge, Sarah jumped off, but her note about how we've been having a lot of events at Reimagine about the Black experience, but not as much about whiteness and white supremacy. And I think that's a great thing that she called out. And just to say, as something as an organization right now, we are figuring out like how we want to expand our offerings around these types of topics, and are actually going through our own type of training and discussions. I think that we should be doing more events around specifically around white supremacy and thinking about our relationship with whiteness. So look out for things. And if anybody has any more ideas, you can always email me at dara@letsreimagine.org. And if there's any speakers that you've been looking out for, please feel free to reach out to me as well. But thank you all. This was just a beautiful discussion. So
Thank you. Thank you, Karin. Thank you, Dara. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.